The title of this video is DBT Therapy Emotion Regulation Skills, the Definitive Guide, Part 1. I am fully aware that this is a pretty bold claim. Any title with the definitive guide in it sounds like a marketing trick, doesn't it? But I assure you, I intend nothing other than to give you what the title of this video promises. In return, what I want from you is to practice these skills. Unlike some therapies, DBT is heavily exercise-based. To receive maximum benefits, I advise you to use DBT as it's intended, by practicing its specific skills. Before we get into it, let me give you a quick overview. In dialectical behavior therapy, there are 4 skill modules. One of them is Emotion Regulation Skills. You can see the 4 modules as the pillars of DBT. The Emotion Regulation module is made up of 9 different skills. In part 1 of this video, we'll be discussing 5 of them, and in part 2, the remaining 4. This video is filled with examples, information, and exercises. It is not meant to be watched and done in one sitting. Instead, it is something that you can continuously come back to as you learn more and more about DBT's emotion regulation skills. The exercises build upon each other, so please do them in order for maximum benefit. So let's get started by first asking ourselves what the hell is an emotion in the first place. To put it simply, emotions are just messages. Messages that the body sends out to let you know what is going on inside of you. The body can have all sorts of different reasons to send out messages, but most of the time, the messages are about what's good or bad for you. Maybe this sounds strange to you because you may, at the moment, experience your emotions as a source of stress instead of a helpful guide. Or maybe you don't believe we should trust our emotions in the first place. When you hear advice like, follow your emotions, do what feels right, a lot of the time, drugs, fast food, and immediate sexual gratification comes to mind. You might think to yourself, these things feel good too, but aren't necessarily good for me in the long run. So why should I trust my emotions to tell me what's good or bad? Well, like most things in life, it isn't a black and white thing. There are a few glitches in the system. However, this doesn't take away from the fact that most of the time, your body knows what it needs and wants physically and psychologically. To stop trusting your body entirely just because there are a few glitches in the system robs you of an internal compass that has evolved over hundreds and thousands of years to help you stay healthy and happy. Before we continue further, it is essential to learn the difference between primary and secondary emotions. Primary emotion is the direct emotional reaction to a specific situation. Let's use Aiden as an example. Let's say Aiden's boss walks up to him and tells him, in 1 week from now, I need you to give a presentation. Aiden agrees, obviously, because it's his boss, but feels anxious about it. He does his best to prepare, but as the day draws near, he starts to feel more and more depressed. He thinks to himself, I am worthless. If I weren't, I wouldn't experience so much anxiety about having to give this presentation. After the presentation, Aiden is slightly relieved because, let's face it, it's over, but almost immediately feels ashamed for having made such a big deal out of it. In this example, the primary emotion is anxiety. The secondary emotions are worthlessness, shame, relief, and depression. As you can see, emotions can get real complex real fast. A lot of the time, primary emotions set off a chain of secondary emotions that end up causing you more pain than your original emotion does. Therefore, being able to differentiate between primary and secondary emotions is important, as it gives you insight into cause and effect. Without this knowledge, it's hard to know what to change, what to accept, and how to think about your emotions in the situation. If you don't know yet how to do all this stuff, don't worry. DBT specializes in these sort of things. Just like knowing the difference between primary and secondary emotions is important, it is also important to understand what the fight, flight, or freeze response is. also known as the acute stress response. When you feel like you're in physical danger, your body can respond in three ways: by either fighting, fleeing, or freezing. Which strategy you choose will come down to the situation, your skill sets, your temperament, and past experiences with similar situations. This is a hardwired reaction to danger that we have inherited from our ancestors. Therefore, it is involuntary. Back in the day, it used to be a good reaction to most challenges our ancestors faced. That is why they have passed it on to us. But in modern society, most of the time, this strategy is totally unnecessary, as we are rarely in real physical danger. Unfortunately, this response can also be triggered when we're under a lot of stress, without there actually being a real threat. And I don't have to tell you how stressful modern society can be. The fight, flight, or freeze response can be seductive, as it gives you momentarily more energy and concentration so you can deal with the problem at hand. But it always comes at a price. For starters, during this response, you cannot think constructively. Most decisions during this response are not rational. But then again, this response isn't supposed to help you be reasonable. It is meant to keep you alive at all costs. Secondly, every time your body activates this response, its regular functioning gets disrupted. And this disruption is harmful if it takes too long or happens often. Thanks to DBT, we can learn how to manage our emotions better so we don't have to tap into this mechanism all the time. Because if we do, in the long run, it will be bad for our physical and mental health. A quick side note. In the DBT literature, we come across the word emotion regulation a lot. For me, the word regulation is not appropriate since it makes us sound as if we are robots. So going forward, I'm going to change the word regulate to the word manage. So up until this point, we have discussed what emotions roughly are. Now, it is time to discuss how we can recognize them and why it is important to do so. I am sure it doesn't come as a surprise to you when I say to manage something, we first have to know what it is we're trying to manage. Therefore, being able to recognize your emotions is the first step in being able to manage them. If you're not particularly good at recognizing how you feel, don't be alarmed. Most people aren't. You may think to yourself, okay, well, if most people aren't good at it, and I already have difficulty dealing with emotions, how will I ever be able to learn this skill set? Will it be too hard for me? My answer to that is most people don't even try to learn how to recognize their emotions properly. If they did, they will be able to. So here are two benefits of being aware of your emotions. The first one is when you recognize an overwhelming emotion, it helps to slow down your mind, making it less likely for you to get flooded with unhelpful secondary emotions. When I first discovered this information, it seemed very odd to me because it seemed so simple. But the literature is very clear on this. Research has shown time after time that becoming aware of an overwhelming emotion will decrease its intensity and frequency, make it lose its venom, as it were. The good news is that the same counts for bodily sensations. For example, if your heart is beating fast, by simply becoming aware of it, your heart will start to beat slower. The second benefit is by being able to recognize your initial emotional reaction to a situation, you can trace the problem back to its root. This way, in the future, you'll be better able to cope or fix the problem. Now that you know why recognizing emotions is important, it is time for an example, followed up by an exercise. Remember, you will only learn these skills if you practice them. Just watching this video about DBT is not good enough. I wish it were, then I could help so many more people get better so much faster. Let's say Anna has trouble managing her emotions. She often feels intense negative emotions like anger, hopelessness, and shame. And she doesn't know what to do with these emotions because they're too frequent and too intense. So one day after she comes back home from work, she sees her husband drunk on the couch again. Seeing him like this, she immediately becomes angry and shouts, "You worthless drunk." As she says this, he just lays there and doesn't say anything back. After a few minutes of shouting and wanting to hit him, she feels so hopeless and ashamed that she leaves to lock herself up in the toilet. She really wants to help him, but she just doesn't know how. She tried to talk to him about therapy and AA meetings, but he doesn't consider himself an alcoholic. She feels like she has tried everything in her power to help him. She feels conflicted because she wants to leave him, but at the same time, she loves him. She cannot bear the idea of a divorce. Instead, she thinks about ending her life. To her, suicide seems like the best option because she doesn't see any way out of the situation, and she just wants the pain to go away. So instead, she starts cutting herself in the toilet. By cutting herself, she momentarily distracts herself from the pain. Thanks to this situation, the next day she's late for work and her supervisor is not happy about it. He ends up scolding her. Now let's say Anna knows about DBT and she wants to use it to recognize and manage her emotions. How would she go about doing this? For example, Anna could do the exercise, recognize your emotions in 7 steps. Let's look at Anna's answers for this exercise, shall we? On the left side, we see the questions you have to ask yourself. And on the right side, you can put down your answers. So the first question is, when did the emotion-invoking situation happen? Anna answered, it happened 2 days ago. It was at night around 7. Now, please read the rest of Anna's answers on your own and afterward, do this exercise for yourself. Remember, you do not have to be in a crisis to do this exercise, and you do not have to only use it for the most overwhelming emotions. This exercise can also be used for less intense negative emotions or even positive ones. The trick is, by doing this exercise regularly, you'll become good at recognizing what, how, when, and why you feel the way you feel. This will give you tremendous possibilities in managing your emotions. You can find all the featured exercises in this video on my website for free. I have put the links below in the description. Now, please pause the video, download the exercise, and fill it out. I will see you after you're done. Okay, welcome back. I hope you actually paused and did the exercise. Like I've mentioned earlier, everything in DBT builds upon each other. And without doing the exercises, DBT will not be effective. Now it is time to talk about barriers to healthy emotions. What do I mean by this? So in the last exercise, we practiced how to recognize our emotions. However, as you may have noticed, in daily life, emotions are usually linked to behaviors and thoughts. If we want to be successful at managing our emotions, we will have to take behaviors and thoughts into consideration as well. Let's illustrate this process with an example. Let's say Tim lost his favorite watch. Losing a watch can be described as a behavior. And since it was Tim's favorite watch, losing it made him very sad. So the behavior of losing a watch made him feel the emotion sadness. After losing his favorite watch and the sadness that came with it, he thought to himself, I'm so absent, I'm a moron. Thinking this way just made him feel even sadder. So he went home, started drinking lots of alcohol, and later felt ashamed for drinking so much. So as we can see with Tim's example, emotions can be both the result and the cause of thoughts and behaviors. They are interlinked. And if we're not aware of our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, it is effortless to end up in a downward spiral of negativity. You may have experienced something similar that has happened to Tim in your own life, because an emotion rarely manifests itself without complementary thoughts and behaviors. Emotions, thoughts, and behaviors by nature operate together. This by itself is neither a good or a bad thing. It all depends on what we do with this information. For example, we can engage in positive behaviors like exercise and spending time with loved ones to create further positive thoughts and emotions. Or we can, with the help of DBT, challenge old negative thinking patterns to decrease negative emotions and self-destructive behaviors. Or we can continuously end up in a vicious cycle of negativity whenever we feel bad or something bad happens to us. I think most of us can relate to Tim's story, even though his behavior is obviously self-destructive. All of us, at one point in our lives, have engaged in self-destructive behavior. So you being one of us, you probably are or did too. The thing is, usually behind every self-destructive behavior lies an overwhelming emotion. It is challenging to, let's say, act right when you feel overwhelmed emotionally. There are many examples of self-destructive behaviors, but things that automatically come to mind are overeating, undereating, risky sexual behavior, using a lot of drugs or alcohol, cutting oneself, or manipulating others. Sometimes self-destructive behaviors are more subtle, like self-sabotage. For example, not taking the job you want, even though you know you're qualified for it, just because you feel like you're not good enough for the position. The question then is, why do we self-sabotage? Why do we sometimes engage in self-destructive behaviors? Just like it's crucial to understand primary and secondary emotions, it's also important to understand the different causes of self-destructive behaviors. The two main reasons for self-destructive behaviors are: number one is overwhelming emotions, and number two is learned patterns of behavior. Earlier, we had discussed how to recognize emotions so we can be less overwhelmed by them. Now it's time to go deeper into the second, but just as important cause of self-destructive behaviors: learned patterns of behavior. To put it simply, a behavior is only learned if it's rewarded. It only keeps on recurring if it keeps being rewarded. Whether we observe somebody else being rewarded for a behavior, motivating us also to display the same behavior, or us directly being rewarded for a behavior, when analyzed, it turns out, in some shape or form, rewards are always at play for learning and repeating behavior. The reward, however, does not have to be an external one like a paycheck, degree, or, let's say, praise. It can also be an internal one, for example, a musician playing an instrument for the joy of creating music, or a gardener planting seeds for the pleasure of helping the seed become a flower. So here's an example of self-destructive behavior when analyzed with the new information we have. This example is about Mary. Growing up, Mary was never taught how to deal with painful emotions. Whenever she felt sad or angry, she just suffered alone without any support. Then, in her adult life, she realized whenever she was in pain, people would pay attention to her if she upset them. For example, whenever she felt bad, she would start a fight with her husband. This way, she forced him to pay attention to her pain by causing pain in him. Let it be clear that Mary did not cause pain in her partner consciously or with bad intentions. Somewhere along the line, picking fights was the only option for her pain to be acknowledged by her loved ones. And then she simply got used to it. This strategy is not a useful long-term solution as it creates conflict in order to satisfy basic emotional needs. Whenever Mary was in pain and wanted to be heard, understood, supported, acknowledged, and validated, she caused pain in her partner because she thought that this was the only way for her emotional needs to be met. So, to sum it all up, let's say Mary feels depressed. As a consequence, she starts an argument with her husband. Her spouse rewards her behavior with attention, more specific attention to her pain. Mary feels validated, and in the future, whenever she feels pain, she creates more conflict. So now that we know that overwhelming emotions and learned patterns of behavior are behind self-destructive behaviors, let's talk a bit about the two most common self-destructive behaviors. The first standard self-destructive behavior is self-mutilation. People who cut themselves or engage in any other sort of self-mutilation claim it distracts them from pain. There is some legitimacy to this claim. For example, when the body is hurt, certain chemicals are released to feel less pain. The body uses these chemicals to calm itself down because when the body is calmer, it can more easily repair itself. These chemicals also help the person feel better in general, thus making dealing with painful emotions easier. However, this so-called benefit of self-mutilation is short-lived. First of all, self-mutilation is physically dangerous. It can lead to infection and death. Secondly, after the self-mutilation, people usually experience intense negative emotions like shame, regret, feelings of inadequacy, and hopelessness. Thirdly, self-mutilation causes permanent scars that remain behind as constant reminders of a time of extreme pain and sorrow. As you can see, self-mutilation is a terrible long-term solution for overwhelming emotions. If you engage in any form of self-mutilation, please do the next exercise. You can find the link to this exercise just like all the other exercises in the description below. Okay, this brings us to the second most common self-destructive behavior, which is manipulation. Earlier, we saw the example of Mary. We saw how she picked fights with her husband whenever she felt bad so that he could acknowledge her pain. Even though Mary was not doing this consciously and her heart was in the right place, her behavior can be described as manipulative. As you can imagine, nobody likes to be manipulated. Sooner or later, the person will put up resistance and the relationship will become combative, unsatisfactory, and come to an end. This is usually the worst case scenario for people who suffer from uncontrollable, intense emotions. Typically, the manipulation is done out of worry for abandonment or for wanting to be liked. In the long run, this type of self-destructive behavior destroys relationships, making fears reality. If you engage in manipulation, don't think you're the only one. Most people have manipulated somebody in some point in their lives, and a lot of us occasionally still do. What is important, however, is that realizing in the long run manipulation destroys relationships, not enhance them. We should try to manipulate as little as possible, and when we do slip up, admit our mistake to the person we tried to manipulate and say sorry. Okay, it's time for another exercise. You probably don't like this part, but in the end, this is what's going to help the most with managing our emotions. So please pause the video and do the next exercise. Okay, welcome back. Congratulations! You're about halfway through the module Emotion Regulation Skills. That is great. A lot of people don't last this long and end up not reaping any long-lasting benefits from DBT. But you are on your way to a great start. If you've done all the exercises up till this point and in the future, you intend to keep doing them regularly, then you cannot go wrong. You will become better and better at managing your emotions. Now, this brings us to the third emotion regulation skill, reducing your physical vulnerability to overwhelming emotions. Not only do behaviors and thoughts influence your emotions, but so does food, sleep, drugs, alcohol, exercise, illness, and physical pain. These factors are sometimes overlooked in other forms of therapy, but not in DBT. You may find it strange to devote so much attention to things that seem so obvious, but these factors also influence emotions just as much as thoughts and behaviors. So it's definitely a good idea to briefly refresh our knowledge on these so-called obvious topics. Let's start by discussing food. Food directly influences how you feel, both emotionally and physically. For example, eating ice cream or other fast foods often produce instant feelings of satisfaction and joy. Consumed in large quantities, however, they make you feel tired and sluggish. I won't pretend that I never eat fast food. I am no stranger to eating a burger or two, especially after a long, stressful day. However, I am fully aware of how dangerous foods high in sugar, fat, and salt are for my health. The thing is, I think a lot of people don't have enough motivation to follow a proper diet because there's no agreement, even among scientists, what constitutes a good diet and what doesn't. For example, eggs were frowned upon for a very long time, and now medical professionals claim they are good for us after all. Or what about milk? Just like with eggs, every 10 to 20 years, doctors change their minds about whether it's good or bad for us. Sometimes they say it's unnatural for humans to drink milk because milk is meant for babies. And other times they say it's the best way to get our calcium needs met because the calcium in milk is easier to absorb than the calcium that we can get through vegetables. So dietitians and medical professionals do not agree on a lot of things when it comes down to diet. However, luckily, they do agree on certain things. For example, when it comes down to consuming large quantities of sugar, bad fats, and salt, they all agree it is a bad idea. If you want to get nerdy with it, I suggest you look up some scientific articles discussing the effects of a bad diet. This can really motivate you to improve your diet. It sure has helped to change mine. At the end of the day, a diet full of fat, salt, and sugar increases your chances for all sorts of illnesses and ailments. Here is a quick overview of the consequences of having such a bad diet for a long time. Obesity, diabetes, heart disease, inflammation, arthritis, cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, and strokes. And yeah, that doesn't sound so good, does it? Also, studies have clearly shown the effects of obesity on mental health. For example, people who are overweight, on average, suffer more from anxiety, depression, feelings of inferiority, and worthlessness. It isn't just obesity that can mess with your mental health. By simply not feeding your body the nutrition it needs to function properly, it also becomes much harder to regulate your emotions. I mean, think about it. If you're tired, have no concentration, feel sluggish, and something happens that makes you feel overwhelmed, in such a situation, it is challenging to manage your emotions, almost impossible. This is where a good diet comes in handy to give you the energy and concentration you need to be able to manage your emotions. You may think to yourself, I don't need a good diet. I can eat whatever I want and stay fit and slim. So who cares? If this is you, I have some bad news for you. Some people wear high-calorie but low-nutrient-dense foods well, as they don't gain much weight when consuming them in large quantities. But unfortunately, this is irrelevant. Foods high in sugar, fat, and salt still damage your cardiovascular system, cause inflammation, and mess up your insulin sensitivity, while on the outside you can, for the time being, still look fine. So even if you are one of the lucky ones and you can look just fine while consuming a bad diet, it will still damage your physical and mental health. Okay, up till this point, we have discussed overeating high-calorie, low-nutrient-dense foods filled with sugar, salt, and fat. However, on the other side of the spectrum, you have people who eat healthy but simply not enough. Eating large quantities of unhealthy foods is not the only way to mess up your health. You can do it just as easily by eating healthy foods, but just not enough of them. For example, not consuming enough calories can lead to insomnia, depression, anemia, trouble concentrating, anxiety, abnormally low blood pressure and slow heart rate, and many more terrible things. On a more positive note, also, there are certain minerals, vitamins, and fats directly linked to your mood and energy level. For example, iron, omega-3, magnesium, vitamin D, B12, and B6. I'm not saying all the other vitamins and minerals are not important. However, in my clinical practice, when my clients consume more foods containing these 6 specific vitamins, minerals, and fat, they usually start to see improvement in their mood and energy levels pretty fast. At the end of the day, nutrition is too important not actively to focus on it. It is not enough to say, I will just eat 2 fruits a day and be done with it. If you're serious about being emotionally and physically healthy, we will have to work on your diet. Maybe you are the exception and you already have an amazing diet, but unfortunately, most people don't. Most people watching this video usually consume a typical Western diet, which tends to be unhealthy. Instead of a Western diet, try to eat a Mediterranean one. The average Mediterranean diet consists mainly of vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, and seeds, with the occasional, usually twice a week, meat. The Mediterranean diet is considered to be one of the healthiest or the healthiest diet in the world. What is so typical about this diet is that it doesn't contain much fat, meat, salt, or sugar. If fats are used, they are almost always from good sources like fish, olive oil, nuts, and seeds. And when grains are used, they're almost always whole grains like dark pasta. Anyhow, there's no one Mediterranean diet. You can simply Google different Mediterranean diets and just pick one that tickles your fancy. A little disclaimer here, of course, if you have a food allergy of some sort or a physical illness, my advice might not be helpful for you. In such cases, make sure to consult a nutritionist just to be sure you are eating what you need to be healthy. Now that we have discussed food as an important factor in managing our emotions, let's talk about drugs and alcohol. Just like food, it may seem obvious to you that drugs and alcohol influence mood a lot. In fact, it is so obvious that most therapy forms do not pay enough attention to the influence of alcohol on mood. But DBT does not make that mistake. Drugs and alcohol influence mood just as much or more than all the other things we have discussed up till this point. So it is vital that we discuss it even if it's briefly. In a nutshell, alcohol is a depressant. Nicotine and caffeine are stimulants. Some prescription drugs are addictive and mood altering. You may raise an eyebrow when you hear me say alcohol is a depressant. Most people consider alcohol as relaxing, a medicine to deal with their pain and sorrows, not something that makes them depressed. What the medical community means by a depressant, however, is something different. We call something a depressant if it slows down the nervous system. That is where alcohol gets its relaxation effect from. As you can imagine, the brain plays a vital part in emotion regulation, and alcohol doesn't exactly help the brain do its day-to-day job. Instead, it hampers the brain's ability to send out messages by slowing down its operations. People experience this as relaxing, but what is actually happening is that the brain's normal and necessary functioning is being disrupted. If this goes on long enough by regularly consuming high volumes of alcohol, the brain's pathways, its messengers, its tissues all become desynced and damaged, resulting in an unhealthy brain. And by definition, an unhealthy brain equals a depressed brain. Also, alcohol is very tolerance sensitive, meaning that to create the same effect, you will need to consume more and more alcohol. This is a recipe for disaster. Other psychoactive substances like caffeine, nicotine, some prescription drugs, although legal, have similar effects as they disrupt the body's regular functioning and create dependence. At the end of the day, it is difficult to cope with overwhelming emotions if we don't take care of our bodies properly. Unfortunately, in daily life, we pretend as if there's a duality of some sort. We usually talk about our bodies as a separate entity, as if it's a machine that's not directly connected to who we truly are or how we feel. In reality, there's no duality. You are your body. Every time you damage it through excessive drug or alcohol use, it will influence the way you feel and think. This goes both ways. Your thoughts and feelings also influence your bodily health, either in a good or in a bad way. Disrupting your body's natural physiology by using addictive substances is never a good idea, as it creates a vulnerable mind and body, making emotion regulation that much harder. That being said, if you're at the moment addicted to a substance, returning to, let's say, normal is easier said than done. I don't recommend anybody with an addiction to undergo the process of becoming sober all alone. If this is you, please seek professional help. The good news is there are many effective treatments out there like DBT or CBT that can help you overcome your addiction. I mean, come on, you're already watching this video and doing exercises, so you're off to a very good start. Now, whether you're currently addicted to a substance or you are simply self-medicating through alcohol or drugs, the next exercise will help you. Please pause the video and do the exercise. Welcome back. So, in our effort to reduce our physical vulnerability to overwhelming emotions, we have discussed diet, drugs, and alcohol up until this point. Another important factor in this matter is physical exercise. You see, our bodies are designed for physical activity. It is something predetermined, as we have simply inherited our bodies from our ancestors. They were physically active, and we still share most of our genes with them. Therefore, we too have to be physically active if we want to be mentally and physically healthy. The good news is that you don't have to become a bodybuilder or a mountain climber to reap the benefits of physical exercise. Something less ambitious, like taking daily long walks, can already do the trick. Just make sure most days of the week you are active for at least 30 minutes. What do I mean by being active? Any type of physical effort that makes you work harder than you usually do can be considered being active. For example, walking, jogging, swimming, lifting weights, yoga, biking, fencing, skateboarding, playing tennis, etc., etc. A little disclaimer here: if you have an existing physical problem, please make sure to consult a medical professional before engaging in any physical activity. Also, some sports, if done regularly, are injury-prone. When first starting out, make sure to learn the proper exercises for your preferred sport to avoid future injuries. You can do this through YouTube or simply by hiring a qualified trainer for just the first few sessions. Time for another exercise. Please pause the video and do the following exercise. Okay, welcome back. It is time to discuss our sleeping patterns. Sleep, just like food, drugs, alcohol, and exercise, tremendously influences our physical and mental well-being. Together, let's go through some facts about sleeping. Just read along with me. Your body needs sleep to repair itself. Yeah, well, duh. The average adult needs 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. Some adults need slightly more. Children between 1 and 5 of age need 12 to 14 hours a day sleep. The need for sleep decreases gradually as we become older. A lot of accidents happen because of a lack of sleep. Alcohol makes it easier to fall asleep, but disturbs your sleep quality, thus making it a bad sleeping aid. Lack of sleep influences the ability to tolerate mental and physical pain. Humans are the only animals that willingly delay sleep. Around 10 to 15% of people are sleepwalkers. Exercising regularly helps to fall asleep faster and improves sleep quality. However, exercising right before bed makes it harder to fall asleep and stay asleep. The body hates shift work, no matter how much you try. Lack of sleep increases appetite. Now, the things we have just discussed are general facts about sleeping. There's also something called sleep hygiene. It is a sort of a checklist that you can go through to optimize your sleep. Let's just go through it together, just like we did before with general facts about sleep. Don't use foods or products that contain caffeine 6 hours before going to bed. Don't use nicotine, alcohol, and other psychoactive substances before going to bed. If you happen to wake up during the night, don't take them then either. Avoid mental stimulation before going to bed, for example, like watching your favorite TV show or reading difficult scientific literature. Avoid bright screens before going to bed, like television and laptop screens, because they are very stimulating and can keep you awake. Don't eat a lot or engage in physical exercise before going to bed. Don't nap during the day. It has the benefit of making you feel less tired during the day, but this will spill over into the night and make it harder for you to fall and stay asleep. Keep your bedroom as comfortable as possible. This means clean, quiet, dark, not too hot or too cold. To help you achieve this, you can use a sleep mask and/or earplugs. Consider darkening your bedroom by getting special curtains if in the morning you're exposed to too much light. Use your bedroom only for sleep and sex. For example, don't watch TV or work while in bed. This way, whenever you enter your bedroom, your brain will be reminded to go to sleep. If for whatever reason you can't fall asleep, don't lay around hoping it will eventually happen. Get out of bed and do something that you consider relaxing until you feel tired enough to give it another try. The same counts for if you happen to wake up during the night. Create a regular sleeping pattern. Every night, go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. Have a bedtime ritual that helps you to relax. Every day before bed, for example, consistently do one or more of these activities. Take a shower/bath. Meditate. Pray. Write down your emotions and thoughts. Use relaxation techniques like progressive muscle relaxation and so on. Let's say you tried all these things and you still have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. In that case, you might have sleep apnea or problems with snoring. You see, blockages in your nose, ear, or throat can make you snore excessively. This can stop you from falling asleep deeply or wake you up during the night. In the case of sleep apnea and excessive snoring, the best thing to do is to visit a medical professional. If you suffer from sleep apnea, make sure to visit a pulmonologist. If you think you have trouble sleeping because of snoring, make sure to visit a doctor that I have a hard time pronouncing. They're called otolaryngologists. Even a dentist, in a lot of cases, can help you by making an appliance to help you breathe better at night. A lot of the time, however, insomnia is caused by psychological problems. And in that case, you're already working on it by watching this video. Next to watching this video, if you keep having trouble sleeping, I do also recommend seeing a therapist once a week. I know being able to sleep well is easier said than done. Modern life can be stressful with its long commutes, deadly viruses, pollution, demanding jobs, long working hours, overpopulated living and working spaces, and negative world news. To be able to better handle the challenges of modernity, it is necessary to have healthy ways of de-stressing, which will also help with sleep. DBT offers many exercises and techniques to do just that. Let us together discover where your physical tension and stress mainly comes from by doing the next exercise. In a second, I want you to pause the video and ask yourself, where and when do I experience physical tension and stress? For example, is your job causing you physical tension? Maybe lack of sleep, long commutes. What is it exactly? Maybe it is the physicality of your job that's causing you physical tension. Please pause the video and do the following exercise. Okay, welcome back. Now that we have discussed the factors that cause physical vulnerability, it is time to discuss 3 factors that cause cognitive vulnerability and, most importantly, how we can improve our cognitive fitness, as it were, so we can better manage our emotions. Earlier, we saw how Tim thought of himself as an absent-minded moron after losing his favorite watch. We saw how, after dwelling on this thought for an entire day, he felt worse and worse, culminating in him drinking lots of alcohol once he got home to deal with his overwhelming emotions. In DBT, we call thoughts like, "I'm an absent-minded moron," trigger thoughts. They're called as such because they're typically at the cause of emotional pain and suffering. Here are some more examples of trigger thoughts. "I can't do the simplest things, I'm stupid." "I can't do anything right, I'm a moron, an idiot." "Nobody will ever love me." "I am not worthy of happiness because I'm worth less than others." "There's something wrong with me, otherwise things will be better." "I'm not a good person, I have wicked desires." "I always fail at everything, I'm a failure." "I am incompetent." "I'm a loser. Nobody cares about me." "People cannot be trusted, they always hurt me." "They are laughing at me." "Nobody wants to be my friend." "I don't deserve love, happiness, success, health." "I am destined to be alone." "I am too damaged." "People will always abandon me." "I am not normal, I will never be accepted." The good news is that these thoughts are just part of being human. Everybody has them from time to time. They only become a problem when you dwell on them too long or take them as indisputable truths. Unfortunately, that is exactly what people do who have a hard time managing their emotions. The strange thing about trigger thoughts is they feel intensely personal, as if they reveal the truth of who you truly are. But you may be surprised to find out that they have their origins in others, not in you. What I mean by that is somewhere along the line, you have picked up the critical and negative thoughts of others and internalized them as your own. Now, every time something goes slightly wrong, you're listening to the opinion of others in the form of your own internal voice, which can be a good or a bad thing depending how nurturing your environment was while growing up. Like many people, if you did not have the luxury of growing up among conscious, nurturing adults, then your inner thoughts will not be much help to you. But don't worry, we can do a lot about negative and trigger thoughts. A big part of emotion regulation is developing a different relationship to trigger thoughts. It is important to note that we can never fully get rid of them since they are part of the human condition. However, by changing our relationship to them, their intensity and frequency will decrease. So which DBT exercises can we do to deal with trigger thoughts? In the module Emotion Regulation Skills, we have 3 specific exercises that are designed to help us better manage trigger thoughts. Exercise number 1, thought and emotion diffusion. Exercise number 2, coping thoughts. Exercise number 3, balancing your thoughts and emotions through being aware of filtering. Earlier in the video, we have discussed how emotions are messages that the body sends out to communicate its needs. Now let's discuss another important characteristic of emotions: impermanence. Emotions indeed let you know what is going on inside of you, what you want and desire, what is right for you and what isn't. But all these messages are only temporary because they come and go. They're always changing. For example, what you may want right now might change in a month or a year, or you may feel bad now, but in a month from now, you can be doing much better. That is the nature of emotions. Emotions come and they go. We have earlier discussed how thoughts and emotions in day-to-day life accompany each other. They can a lot of the time feel as if they are the same thing. They're not exactly the same thing, but they do share a lot of characteristics Just like emotions, also thoughts come and go. They're always changing. For example, you may right now think about something a certain way, but that does not have to be the case in the future. What happens a lot is when discussing emotions and thoughts, most people wonder what the difference is between them. Frankly speaking, nobody really knows. There are competing theories about this matter. However, don't be alarmed, it's not important to know what exactly the difference is. We don't know what exactly gravity is either, but we know enough to use it in our favor. Here are two things that we know for sure about emotions and thoughts. Number one, both thoughts and emotions are temporary, meaning they come and go. Therefore, dwelling on something or taking something very serious that's bound to change isn't helpful. Number two, emotions and thoughts are not the same, but sometimes they feel the same as they're closely linked to each other. A thought usually accompanies an emotion, or an emotion usually accompanies a thought. The trick then is to appreciate emotions and thoughts for what they really are and not turn them into unchangeable, all-important, eternal truths of what you want or who you are. Easier said than done, right? Well, don't worry. DBT also offers exercises to become better at this. For the next exercise, you're going to need a comfortable, quiet place where you can be alone for the next 10 to 15 minutes. The point of the next exercise is to observe your emotions and thoughts without dwelling on them, to let them come and go. Maybe at the moment, this exercise sounds too hard for you. To be able to decide which emotions and thoughts you will focus on and which you will let go sounds pretty miraculous, doesn't it? Well, there's some good and bad news. The good news is it is within the realm of possibilities. The bad news is it takes practice. Don't get me wrong, you don't need to quit your job, leave your family and friends, and live in a cave to become good at this exercise. You can already experience great benefits by only doing it 10 to 15 minutes a day. However, if you choose to become good at it by doing it even longer and more often, let's say 3 times a day, 30 minutes at a time, then I can guarantee you it is going to transform your life for the better. Okay, so how does the exercise exactly look like? Now, I don't know if you're a visual or a verbal thinker, meaning do you think more in images or more in words? This will largely determine which version of this exercise will be better for you. Most people are usually a mix though. Let's discover together which version of this exercise works the best for you. Here are 3 examples. Imagine you're laying on a green field, there's nobody around. In the sky, there are bright, big, white clouds, but you're only looking at the one right in front of you. Now imagine this big, fluffy, white cloud that you're staring at has a thought or an emotion of yours written on it. As you stare at it, it slowly moves away from your eyesight and disappears. As you lay there on that green field with a beautiful blue sky filled with big fluffy white clouds, a different cloud replaces its place. But also, this cloud encapsulates a thought or an emotion of yours. As you lay there, also this new cloud simply reveals itself to you and then slowly disappears just like the previous one. Visualization exercises like this one really capture what emotions and thoughts are in their essence. Through such exercises, we can honor the wisdom of our thoughts and emotions by temporarily experiencing them. We can take lessons from them, but also be reminded of their impermanent nature, so we don't dwell on them too long or take them too serious. Okay, I want to share 2 more examples of this exercise with you. And please feel free to think of your own after hearing the ones I shared with you. The point is to find out which form of this exercise works the best for you. Okay, imagine it's a beautiful summer day, you're sitting near a stream. As you sit there, you watch leaves with your thoughts and emotions written on them pass you by. The third example is really my favorite. Imagine you're on a beach all by yourself. You're sitting by the sea In front of you on the sand is written an emotion or thought of yours. As you stare at it, the waves simply wash it away. Okay, exercise time. Please pause the video and do one of the 3 versions of this exercise for the next 10 or 15 minutes. Or create one of your own and do that one. I will see you soon. Okay, welcome back. Now that we're done with the exercise thought and emotion diffusion, it is time to move on to the exercise coping thoughts. Just like with thought and emotion diffusion, we can use coping thoughts to manage trigger thoughts better. Coping thoughts are kind of the opposite of trigger thoughts, as they are soothing and helpful when dealing with overwhelming emotions. It is very personal which coping thoughts you find the most helpful. So what I want to do is give you a list of coping thoughts that you possibly can use when you are not feeling well. Of course, you can also create your own by using the list I'm about to give you as inspiration. Before I share with you the list, I want to make clear that it's highly recommended to read coping thoughts even when you're feeling okay. See it as building up a reservoir of positive thoughts and emotions for when in the future you encounter a difficult situation. Let's do it. Are you ready? Nobody's perfect. I'm allowed to make mistakes. This situation will not last forever. I have also survived other painful experiences. I can survive this one too. This too shall pass. My feelings come and go just like waves. I had experienced overwhelming emotions before and survived. I am feeling uncomfortable right now, but I can accept it. I can accept my feelings and this way decrease their intensity. I can feel sad and still deal with the situation. I am strong enough to deal with what is happening right now. This won't get to me. I can ride this out. I can step back, give it a rest, relax, and come back to it later. I have survived similar situations and did well. As difficult the situation may be, I am going to survive it. The current situation sucks, but it's only temporary. I can feel stressed and still deal with the situation. My emotions and thoughts don't control my life. I do. Feelings and thoughts are temporary. They will go away. This is a chance for me to learn how to cope with my fear. If I want to, I can think different thoughts. I can use proven methods to help me through this. I feel this way because of my past. I am not in danger now. I have overcome difficulties before. This will not be different. It is hard to feel at peace now, but this feeling is only temporary. I am going to ride out my feelings as if I were on a wave. The more you practice coping thoughts, the more they will become a part of you. Ideally, these are the thoughts that should have been installed in us by our parents, family, and friends. Unfortunately, most of us walk around with the insecurities, critical, negative thinking of others that we now experience as our own inner voice. You see, a baby is not born with the ability to have internal dialogues. It is something that it slowly learns as it discovers the opinions of others. So no inner voice is original. It is always picked up from somewhere or somebody. Therefore, it is on us to repeat these coping thoughts and internalize them as our own. And if you are lucky, maybe a close friend or your partner will also tell you these coping thoughts. That way, you can internalize them even faster. So one day, they can become really an authentic part of you. So they can become an inner voice that is nice to you. Okay, it is time for another exercise. I know you don't like to do exercises, but unfortunately, that is what's going to help you the most in becoming better at managing your emotions. That doesn't just count for you, but that counts for everybody, including me. By the way, I also do these exercises because I know how transformative they are when done regularly. So please write down which coping thoughts help you the most and try to make a few of your own. Afterward, when you're done, please read them out loud for the next 10 minutes. Like I've mentioned before, DBT's coping thoughts are initially meant for crisis situations. For example, when you're having trigger thoughts and you're about to spiral into an emotional breakdown, you can use them then. But I advise you to also read them to yourself when you're in general doing okay, just to build up reserves for when a crisis does happen. Also, we have to regularly repeat them so we can instill them in ourselves as natural, positive inner voices. Now please pause the video and do the exercise. I will see you soon. Welcome back. This brings us to the last exercise that we can do to manage our trigger thoughts. This exercise is called balancing your thoughts and emotions through being aware of filtering. What do I mean by filtering? Filtering is when you look at a situation from only one side. For example, let's say Caroline was, for most of her life, a straight A student. She had received a full scholarship for her colleges of choice, but for whatever reason, this one time on a math test, she underperformed. Still passed, mind you, but she didn't score an A. After receiving the result of the math test, she thought of herself as a loser. Maybe this sounds strange for you. You may think, why does she care so much if this one time she didn't get an A? Well, Caroline cares because she's filtering. She's filtering away all her successes and only focusing on this one time that she didn't get an A. Let's look at another example to make it more clear. Let's say Jim asked his girlfriend to come over at 2 o'clock. She said, I can't, because I have some stuff to do, but I can come later in the evening, let's say around 6. Tim immediately got upset and accused his girlfriend of not wanting to spend time with him. Well, as we can see, Jim is getting upset because he's solely focusing on his girlfriend not wanting to come over at 2 o'clock. He filters away all the other information his girlfriend gives him. She wants to come over, but just later. She can't come over at 2, not because she doesn't want to spend time with him, but because she has some stuff to do. When talking about other people, it seems so obvious when they are filtering. But in our personal day-to-day life, it is sometimes hard to realize when we are the ones who are filtering. For example, Caroline might not make problems out of her boyfriend coming over later, while Jim maybe is more laid back about school, even if he is a straight A student. So for everybody, filtering is different. There are certain things, people, or situations that can make us filter. Maybe Jim is ultra-sensitive about relationships, but not about school, and Caroline vice versa. So let's take a closer look at the exercise balancing your thoughts and emotions through being aware of filtering. So whenever you find yourself in an emotionally messy situation that causes you to filter, ask yourself these 6 questions. Question number 1, what just happened? Question number 2, how do I think and feel about what happened? Question number 3, what evidence supports how I think and feel? Question number 4, what evidence contradicts how I think and feel? Question number 5, how can I think and feel more accurately about the situation? Question number 6, what can I do to cope with the situation in a healthy way? Okay, let's say Caroline would do this exercise. How would she go about answering these questions? Let's take a look. Okay, now it is time for you to do the exercise. Please pause the video and do it. Welcome back to the last emotion regulation skill in this video. I just want to congratulate you on getting this far. It is absolutely amazing. Now, we have been focusing all this time on recognizing and dealing with negative emotions. But what about positive ones? It is just as important to increase our positive emotions as it is to identify and deal with negative ones. So in the next exercise, we're going to do just that. We're going to solely focus on positive emotions by consciously becoming aware of them, nurturing them, writing them down, and we will strategize how to increase them in the future. This exercise is called the Positive Activities Log. Don't let the simplicity of it fool you. It is extremely powerful when done regularly. Here's an example of this exercise when done by Caroline. Thank you for watching. In part 2 of DBT Therapy Emotion Regulation Skills, the Definitive Guide, we will discuss 4 more emotion regulation skills. I will see you in the next one. And don't forget to subscribe.